Welcome to the Athletic Performance Podcast, a conversation for all things performance related, where we push the boundaries of speed, power, and strength. I'm your host, Ryan Patrick, and we're here to discuss, debate, and enhance athletic development for coaches and athletes alike. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Today on the podcast, we have Mike Lawless. Mike is a doctor of physical therapy and the owner of Lawless Athlete Performance. Not only does Mike have incredible information to share with you, he himself is like John Wick, a man of focus, commitment, and sheer will. As a client, he's one of the most impressive individuals I've ever worked with, rarely ever missing a workout and finding interest physically outside of what we do with a pretty intense strength and conditioning program. He leverages this knowledge to talk about ascending levels for athletes, going from high school to college, and learning how to be at the bottom of the totem pole again, and learning to do the basic things extremely well. He talks about the work that needs to go on in and outside of the gym, and how to properly balance your resources so that you don't burn yourself out. If you're a coach or somebody who loves getting after it, you're going to love this episode. Mike and I go round and round as two strength coaches, talking about all the ins and the outs of working with clients and athletes alike. Sit back and enjoy this episode, and when you finish, make sure to rate and review us with 5 stars only. Without further ado, here's Baba Yaga.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess part of it is jealousy, or what that would be termed. But because the online market seems like it's so oversaturated, and I'm on James's email list, and he said, don't think that way, because there's so many people out there to help. But I feel like there's two groups of online coaches. There's this group that, got into it and they post body online and, maybe don't have the knowledge base that a lot of us hope that we do and want to help people. And then there's that group who, like myself, kind of feel a little bit intimidated, but hopefully have the knowledge base to help a lot of people. And it's when you see online coaching, you're like, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to just post what I look like online and then get clients from there that maybe aren't all that involved, put it at a high price point. But trying to find that blend of using the knowledge that we have to help people and be attractive per se on social media.
There's definitely a lot to be said. This debate goes back and forth. Should a trainer, should a strength coach look a certain way, and does that extend to their credibility? And I think there's plenty of examples of coaches who are in shape, who don't know enough about training, and I think there are plenty of counterexamples of guys who maybe are not in great shape, but actually have a tremendous knowledge base. I think the average strength and conditioning coach at a D1 or NFL level is not a physique looking type of individual. And I think that's totally okay, but gosh, I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but I think there's 2 things that I think about when it's okay, I certainly want to establish my credibility with the foundation of I get results, right? That's to me number 1. 2 is I still want to look the part and walk the walk, more importantly, because I don't like not living it to a certain degree. To me, it feels like there's some dissonance there, maybe some incongruency, and I'm just not okay with that. So for me, that's always still going to be a priority. And to be honest, I just like looking good and feeling good. That's okay. But the Stephen Pressfield book, The Art of War, there's always one page, and it was Kieran I was talking to about this, and I can't remember the verbiage exactly, but the essence of it is, a professional does not boast, but that doesn't mean he's not going to throw down a 360 tomahawk jam just to let the boys know he still means business. And it's I can probably take this approach online, right? Most of the content is going to be about helping coaches, helping athletes, helping people do their exercises better or get more out of it. But every once in a while, it's maybe I just show up and flex somehow. You know what I mean? And so I always think of the Dr. Dre, what about guns? You think I sold them all? It's no, we're still strapped and we're ready to roll. So I don't know. That's just kind of where I am with it. It's I don't want the body to be the leading attractor, but I also am not afraid to remind people that I'm still getting it.
Absolutely. And I feel like I can get caught up in either way, right? Because of kind of a lot of the model that we follow. We are so not picky. Picky is not the right word, but we care about exercise selection a lot. But I think what's been good from a lot of the people that I follow, and I think I saw it on Kyle Dobbs's page, was like, hey, to a certain extent, we're making all of this up. But I think what I am trying to find a blend of right now is like, yes, we're making it up, and I don't have to be so picky about exercise selection, but I think there should be a base knowledge and a trainer or coach's model of knowing what looks like a good exercise selection and progression and what does not. And that's what I want to convey on my content, I would guess.
Yeah, it's a tough line to walk, right? Because certainly I don't want to post technique that looks horrendous. And I see a lot of people, especially in like my local market, they coach large groups of athletes. A lot of kids are running through the same thing. And it's like I can pick 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things out real quick, like, ooh, need to fix that, need to fix that, need to fix that. And that's just how my coaching eye is, right? Because I tell kids, like when they come, I'm like, we do not have any fancy exercises. There's no secret sauce here. We do the common things uncommonly well. That means we're going to take the things you've done or the things you've seen other athletes do, and we're just going to do them at a higher level. And they inherently get this, right? Because if I explain it in terms of their sport, like if you're a basketball player, like emotion offense can be run by any team. It's not like this crazy concept. It's not like they're in semi-pro where they invent the alley oop, right? That's not what happens when you get beat by another team. It's they just execute things at a fundamentally higher level, or they're just more athletic, but still, I mean, it allows them to do the basics well than the opposition. And so, this line that we walk is, what is acceptable for now? Like, I'm not maybe going to get somebody into the perfect squat on day one. So what kind of things am I allowing them to maybe not have perfect? And ultimately what you arrive at is like, here's a hierarchy of things that I want to do, but you have this sense of prioritization of, yeah, these things down here don't matter, right? His like hips a little bit shifted to the right. It's like the kid has no idea how to even like stabilize enough to go through this pattern. I'm not going to worry about a right hip shift, or a loss of like 5 degrees of hip internal rotation. And so, but sometimes I think this tendency is very well intentioned, but it also becomes this like quest for perfection that kind of interferes with like doing things just fundamentally like sound.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think if again getting back to like, well, that is my biggest beef with those separations of those two camps. It's like, well, I don't again, some of it maybe is jealousy because those people obviously have way more clients than I do at this point. But it's like if you talked about the big thing you pride yourself on is like I want to be and walk the talk and look the part and also be based on results. It's like if we're not moving well and we're not doing things over a period of time, we maybe get a quick bout of results just because we're doing something, but those results probably aren't going to stack up well for the long term.
Yeah. With this in mind, I think a really important question that I want to ask you, and for those of you who don't know Mike very well, he is, I feel like you're slowly turning into Cameron Haynes, man. You're just like the do it all man, which is like totally awesome. But I've coached Mike for a while, but Mike is a guy who has a tremendous amount of discipline and structure in his workouts. He's a guy who is tactical with his own training. And you are probably one of the most hybrid athletes that I've ever worked with. Meaning, you are insanely strong, especially when we talk about relative strength to your body weight. Your engine, your work capacity, your endurance, your stamina, however you want to quantify that, is just outrageous. You can jump high. You're pretty fast. Like if we look at like a radar graph of like your fitness attributes, or we're like creating a player, right? And we're trying to pump these stats up. Like you're pretty high in all of these domains. And what I want to ask you is when you're writing your programs and you're thinking about development of either Gen Pop or athletes, what are some of the big rocks in your training program? What are these things that are higher in the hierarchy and more important to you?
Yeah, I think I take that approach, whether it's a bias or not, because of my skills and I guess what I was blessed with, just being diverse. I take that to both Gen Pop and athletes. So I think, and Kyle posted this the other day about sports specific as well. So starting with athletes, like I do not want to, in effect, change how an athlete is playing its sport per se. Um, I just want to give them the best training qualities I can possibly give them to allow them to improve at their sport, right? And I think a lot of us think that way. So in that way, I want to be well-rounded. I want to give them some base power. Like, how do I set up a power exercise that is going to be the simplest way for them to improve their power so they can take that to whatever field or court they play and express that. I'm not trying to change how they express it. So if that's a trap bar jump and I can teach that to a 14-year-old in 10 minutes with a group of 5 people, then I'm going to use the trap bar jump. Not to say I have anything against a power clean. I'm just going to teach that. That looks really powerful. I can progress that very easily, whether it be reps or sets or speed of the bar, whatever it may be. So I just want to start with, let's do something powerful. We talked about me jumping. I still do that even though I'm training for, a triathlon. So that's where I start with my athletes. Like, I want to make them powerful, but in a simple way. And then I think we want to look at strength qualities from a standpoint of squatting, hinging, pressing, pulling. I still do all those in my training. I'm really going to look at the gaps in an athlete and make sure that all of those buckets are filled. And then from a conditioning standpoint, I think that's where it goes back and forth between the old school model of, football coaches making people run 1040s after practice every time. That's what my coach did in high school. And then the kind of opposite of, like, we don't need to condition athletes at all because their sport conditions them. I think a blend of that, because you're maybe going to get some conditioning. I know Christian McCaffrey, it just got posted all over TikTok. It slips my mind who trains him.
Brian
Um,
Kula.
That's right. But, the TikTok post was like, well, he doesn't do anything over 5 seconds, and doing a lot of that anaerobic work, PCR work, because he does such a high volume of it, is conditioning in all sense of the word, which I think fits me with thinking that all conditioning really turns out to be is like volume times intensity. And if your body is able to handle the volume and the intensity that you're giving it, the levers of those probably don't matter all that much. Obviously, if you're biased on one extreme, right? If I'm doing really high volume, slow work, but I'm an explosive athlete, like, no, I'm not saying that for Christian McCaffrey. But I'm saying if within your time domain, especially if you're an athlete, you have a certain amount of time to train. If I can improve your conditioning while not breaking down your body for your sport, I don't know if we need to get super specific about how we're doing that.
100%. Coaches always gravitate towards glycolytic work anyway because it's hard. Most of the athletes that come in that we work with, sprinting to that, I'm like, okay, we're going to sprint today. They're like, ah, shit. Like, you can just see it on their face because they associate, like, sprinting as really glorified conditioning for most athletes. Where we're
Right.
talking about a scenario where it's maximal intensity and very long recoveries. Yet most athletes, they're good at going 90 or even 95%, but they don't understand how to get that extra 5%. And a lot of what you kind of went through there to me was like, it's almost like I think about parenting sometimes, like, make it easy to do the right thing, because and really, like, to drive intensity as high as possible, things need to be simple because complexity just interferes with the ability to raise intensity. Like those two things are definitely inverted. And, it's not saying somebody can't learn to do a power clean, but I think there's a progression for athletes to really use that at the highest level. I mean, you have to understand, like, cleaning a barbell is almost half of an entire sport. That in and of itself is like the sport. So I love what you're saying here. And I would like to kind of continue down this conditioning thing for just a second, if you don't mind. So what are you going to implement with your athletes, knowing that sometimes the coaches maybe get upset at the way athletes are performing versus what, the other competing commitments that athletes are coming to you, which is presumably is like more speed, more power, more explosion.
Yeah, the biggest, and I know but I worked as a strength and conditioning coach in a high school setting where I had all the varsity sports. Now about a year removed from that, but for 2 years. So coming into a new school as the coach over some of their strength and conditioning, right? But some of the top athletes are also going to private strength coaches. So there's always that dynamic of trying not to step on any toes, because there's some strength coaches that are doing great work. There's some that are running through kind of like we talked about. I think we may have been off air, but like a lot of athletes are running through a lot of the same stuff that you can pick out 9 or 10 things movement wise. That's maybe not great, but they're still training. So they're still taking, money out of the bank account. They're still fatigued when they come into me. So trying to adapt to that, one, was challenging. And then you have coaches that are like, when I'm doing high-end power work and speed work with long recoveries on the back end, coaches are like, well, they're not going to be in shape to play their sport. And to me, and I know, we think a lot of the same lines, is if I can get your top end up here, then fatigue-wise, if our top end is higher than a lot of other teams, the other teams are having the same fatigue as my kid. I don't believe I can out-condition 14-year-olds against another team's 14-year-olds. I just don't think, unless we're just not doing anything, sitting on the couch, we're going to get that done. So to me, if I can bring our top end up and have muscular strength, muscular endurance built in the weight room, and really good sprinting mechanics, and bring that top end up, then at the end of a game, it's not aerobic endurance that is making your team tired. It's that they don't have that high of a top end. So, their top end has now come down here.
Yeah. Anybody who watches sports, within the first couple of plays, a team that is just faster, more explosive, and going to be too much to handle. Because if your team is not able to keep up at the intensity of another team, they will wear you out. It doesn't matter how conditioned you are. And when we really think about like the adaptation cycle of the different fitness attributes, the adaptation cycle of maximal speed, or the adaptation cycle of strength or hypertrophy, conditioning happens on the shortest of those cycles. This is why teams can start football in July and be in shape by the end of August. It doesn't take that long. But like if you start weight training in July, you're not going to be a ton stronger by the end of August. It's a much longer adaptation cycle. Power is longer than that. Speed is even longer than that. And so I try to communicate this to athletes. It's like, yes, we need you to be in shape enough to do this work and to recover from it. That is a non-negotiable, because if you can't get sufficient volume, we can't get enough stimulus. But beyond that, it starts to interfere from your recovery potential. And it takes away from the things that I feel like as an athlete are real separators: speed, power, strength. I can get you in shape in a couple weeks. Not a thing. You're going to do some glycolytic work. You're going to do, some alactic aerobic. It's going to suck a little bit, but it's easy in terms of getting you where you need to be. What are your thoughts?
Right. I think two things off of that. Both those adaptations take longer to form because there's skill involved. We're talking like down to the cellular level involved. There's neuro stuff involved with all three of those skills, right? Power, putting those two together in sport skill, so you have new power and strength. Now when I go to cut, that feels different, right? After a 12-week cycle. I know if anyone's gotten more powerful and you go to stick your foot in the ground, you're like, oh, that, even though I have more power now, that feels differently. Like I'm going to move differently. And although those take longer to uh, uh, create the adaptation, we know from research that it's the inverse as far as losing it, right? I'm going to lose that speed quicker. I'm going to lose that power quicker. And I'm noticing that as I'm trying to hold on to those adaptations that I've worked so hard to get as I move personally, as I move into this longer volume endurance work, right? I'm still trying. But the good thing is we know a little amount kind of holds on to those gains that we've made as well if we're intentional about that. The second thing is bringing up, I just listened to Evan Pycon talk about his model, and I try to understand. I hope that I have some sort of grasp on it. It sounds awesome, and I mean he's awesome, obviously, but I think it's a perfect example of that volume intensity thing I was talking about. Even if it was important for your sport to make these aerobic gains, well, do you have an extra 6 hours a week while you're going to 2-hour club practices and coming to me, because we don't have enough time to do the volume that's going to make a difference. We have enough time that's going to do the volume to break you down a little bit and not be able to do the intense volume at the level that we need to. So that's, in more simple terms, that's what I would like to say to parents and sport coaches is it's just like, this is the best bang for our buck.
Absolutely. Like it's, getting in shape again, I think easy, right? You do some things, you build up more capacity, more tolerance. Inherently, I think very valuable for athletes because fatigue is an independent risk factor for injury, right? A lot of things go wrong when people get tired. So again, like I think we can agree, and I think it's important to communicate. We're not saying don't get in shape, don't spend time on this, but when we're talking about really
Right.
really improving these adaptations, like even with aerobic, even though it does happen on one of the shorter timelines, you're still talking about capillary density. You're talking about central adaptations in the heart and enlarging the left ventricle. Like these are also things like if you're really trying to raise the ceiling on VO2 max or raise the levels of hematocrit so you can transfer more oxygen, like these are things that do start to take a little bit longer. But again, it's like it takes a tremendous amount of volume to start to push these things up and so little to just maintain.
Right. And I think you said a great role. And getting back to my programming stuff, if I have the opportunity to work with an athlete for a long period of time, not just 8 weeks, then the more general conditioning models can be worked into those training programs, because we can dial that back when maybe we don't need to take money out of the bank account per se or make people fatigued when I'm getting closer to competition. But when I'm not, I can kind of keep all of those systems intertwined, just like I would in a Gen Pop person. It just may be more structured towards higher intensity because they're going to move towards higher intensity stuff. And that's where Evan's model I thought was cool. Is it's like, okay, we have the muscle that's utilizing. Is it a mitochondrial or capillary density problem that, like, when they go to do a bike sprint, they just like either don't ever go hard enough, right? And the muscle doesn't have the opportunity to build that tissue because it doesn't need to, or like they don't do enough of that work to kind of initiate those adaptations. And then the utilization stuff he talks about, obviously we're going to have to do some of that higher volume work to get those central adaptations and the stuff in the heart. And then he kind of talked about if you don't fit into either one of those models, and I'm summarizing what he does very well, so go listen to Evan's stuff if you want to do that. It'll put your brain in a twister, but also he's great at explaining it. But if you don't fit in either one of those, the muscle utilization or the transport kind of system, then you're more the respiratory model, which that's where we talked about the traditional glycolytic work, to my understanding. So
Yeah, so I want to try to unpack this, and I haven't listened to Evan's stuff, but I think just for the listeners to simplify this, the model of conditioning, if you're just looking at a base level, coaches maybe just do things that get kids in shape, right? So this is we're really talking about an evolution of just how we're approaching training, and his model seems to be based on using different KPIs to see, is
Mm.
this an issue of delivery? Are you getting adequate blood and oxygen to the target tissue? Or do you have an issue at the peripheral end, meaning in the muscle that's working, actually utilizing the substrate in the oxygen that's, or nitric oxide, or however it's, he's approaching that. But are you able to use it on the peripheral end? And again, there's certain physiological markers that we're using to diagnose some of this stuff. Is that fairly accurate?
That's essentially it. Yeah. And then like if you don't fit in most, from my understanding, his kind of research on it is most people are going to fit into one of those two
Mm-hmm.
buckets. And if you're kind of not as limited on that end, you're more respiratory VO2 max stuff, it's more falls into that traditional VO2 max stuff where really high intensity for short intervals, resting and such. So, but not a lot of people are actually limited in his point of view by that actual intake of oxygen as they are the transport and utilization.
Yeah, which is wild to think about because most people feel like they're suffocating. Yet you've
Yeah.
got the ability to continue to unload oxygen, and it's not even a O2 issue; it's a CO2 tolerance issue that I think most people have
Yeah.
trouble with.
Yeah. And again, based on the type of conditioning, if we're talking utilization, you talked about on the peripheral level of, mitochondrial density and stuff like that, you know, again, you kind of have to put in that type of work at a certain level of intensity or you're not going to condition tissue. So
Yeah, I try to communicate this to people, like especially when we do certain lower intensity things, or I give them a protocol that's primarily nasal breathing because they almost feel like they're suffocating, and it's like I know they're going to be okay, and I tell them this is not about um, depriving you of the ability to get oxygen in. It's about you not being able to get as much CO2 out because that is going to build, the sensitivity of different receptors within, your cardiovascular system that are going to allow you to push higher intensities because you're going to be able to tolerate this buildup of CO2, which is really what makes people feel like they're suffocating. And if you don't like cardio and you don't want to do this, you can just hold your breath and see how good you are at that because you'll quickly
yeah.
experience what CO2 buildup feels like. That's what's making you feel like you're suffocating, even though you could probably hold your breath quite a bit longer. It's again not an oxygen thing.
Yeah, there's some research. I forget. I think we were talking about when we all met up in Knoxville there
Mm-hmm.
a couple years ago. Like there's some research on people improving their aerobic capacity by just doing breath holds, right? So not doing actual cardio. I'd rather bang it out on a bike or treadmill, but I guess some people like that.
Yeah, look, I don't have time to sit around and woo-saw my way to fitness. You know what I mean? I gotta get after it. I gotta get some output.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
And I think though that talk of, it's this, it almost gets back to the grind my gear stuff of how am I going to get someone results? And that has to be some sort of a set and myself results, and us as you coaching me, different communication is like, if I'm always doing the same thing and just calling it conditioning or calling it strength training, like always just like, although more people are working out now, and that's great because of what they saw on TikTok or YouTube or whatever. It's like a lot of people are doing the same thing for a long period of time and expecting different results, right? Like, well, I get on the treadmill and I walk for 30 minutes, every day. Like, why did I stop losing weight? Or why do I still feel out of breath when I go do this thing that's way more intense or way longer volume than that? It's like, well, because you either didn't have a coach who steadily progressed you and looked at your movement or looked at your programming and got you to that goal because that's what they know, or you're just not aware of how how hard or how well you're doing something that you're doing.
Yeah, the irresponsible progression can work in one of two ways. A, not progressing at all, or B, going too wild.
Yeah. And I think that is really what is getting back, just drawing it back on the beginning of our conversation, the imposter syndrome that gets me, but I need to be more confident in how I'm progressing people and knowing that, like, no, I got this. I'm always going to be questioning myself, but I got this. Like, this person has this goal. I know how to safely progress and get them there.
Yeah, I think this is I think a lot of the great coaches have imposter syndrome to a certain degree because you and I, just talking about Evan stuff, I don't dive deep into it. I haven't read that research. I know enough and understand conditioning, at least to a level that I can get athletes in shape. I would like to know more, and I'm certainly going to break into that over time. But there's that hesitancy of, well, I don't know as much as the guy who knows the most about the subject. Therefore, I'm not
Yeah.
qualified to speak on it. And so we kind of get in this place of like, we know there are guys who know more about each individual thing than maybe we know, and so we kind of end up playing it a little too reserved. And I think this is probably really important to just discuss in the context of athletes as well, right? Because I see so many athletes who have a tremendous amount of talent, of athleticism, who lack confidence or certainty to a certain degree, and it just manifests as poor play. And so a lot of what we're doing is certainly we want to improve the physiological outcomes and biomechanical outcomes for our athletes, but there are probably psychological components to this as well, because I've seen kids gain confidence from getting stronger. Whether or not strength is the most important thing for them or for their sport, there's the associated benefits that come with just them getting stronger. And so I want to kind of take this conversation. I'd like for you to talk a little bit about, the imposter syndrome and your experience with that. And then maybe enlighten me a little bit, because I'm always curious how people do this and infuse this into their coaching. But I just love to hear, what you're doing with your athletes to maybe, or even Gen Pop clients, especially kids who are rehabbing, to allow them to get back to a level where they're feeling more confident in their practice and their play.
Yeah, I think as you talked about, we have a variety of a range of confidence levels when you're dealing with teenage kids, even into college athletes that are really good. You have a wide range of ego's not really the right word, but I would say a projected ego, at least with kids with lifting. And when they come in, maybe they have a little bit of experience if they're lifting, and or maybe they have no experience at all. And I think you have to kind of deal with that the same way. It's promoting that you kind of know what you're doing and your intent is to make them the best that they can possibly be. I think when I'm trying to coach someone, whether it be a girl that walks through our doors and has never touched a weight in her life and has never seen anyone that looks like her touch a weight in her life, or the teenage boy who maybe has seen something on TikTok and knows that back squatting 400 pounds is the only way he's going to be able to dunk a basketball. Whatever that may be, as long as when I take them through the first thing I'm going to take them through, whether it be, coaching a squat the way that I coach a squat, they feel my intent be there. And I feel like maybe that's the way I clean up a lot of my imposter syndrome myself, is just being intentful when I'm coaching an athlete or coaching a Gen Pop client, that like, hey, this squat is not the most important thing in the world, but because you feel that I want to make you have the best squat you can possibly have, like, that hopefully gets felt through my coaching and cleans up them being like, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing on the teenage boy example that I listed. Like, hey, can we not turn our toes super wide? Like, I'm cool with you being toes out, but this is why I want you to do it this way. Right. And with the girl, example, not dividing the boys or girls, because there's both ones of these, but anybody who's been in a setting knows what I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about. But with her, by the end of that session, being like, heck yeah, I can squat, like this is no problem now. So now when we go to a more complex exercise, she has kind of that win that we had a couple sessions ago, and she can be confident to now get under a barbell and squat because we already have the principles set up.
Yeah. So I'm, the way that I'm hearing you explain this is, one, you're investing yourself in their success and the way they're executing. And two, you're putting them in a position to be successful, which is very congruent with the way you described the big rocks of your program. You want simple things that you know they're going to smash and hit out of the park.
Yes, absolutely. And I think even just based on you describing that right now is I based on an external and internal cueing, going back to a coaching model. But even if I'm kind of using the example of the squat a lot, but I want them to feel at the end of a 20-minute coaching session there on that squat, like why I want it to be done that way. Like for the example of the kid who turns his toes way out, just because that kind of is an easier position to get to, like what he feels when I get him set up in the quote unquote right way to squat for him personally. Like, what does he feel at the end of that session? And I think if I can get an athlete to that point, one, they get more confident in their movement, and also it creates buy-in back to me because they were confident that they knew something, and it's not that I'm telling them that they're wrong per se or putting myself above them. I'm just saying like, hey, that's a thing and this is another thing, and I want to do this thing right now.
Yeah, I think the buy-in piece is so important. And when our athletes come in, one of the first things I try to establish with them is I want to create a thread of similarity across the workout so that they understand like what I'm telling you in one area of maybe how you're squatting is going to be relevant to how we're doing some other things. And it all seems like I just try to kind of hog tie all of these things together and hitch them back to their goal, right? So like we're doing this because it will improve this thing that you wanted to improve. We're also doing that because it's kind of similar, but it goes back to doing that thing. And I think at the end of the day, just good movement in the gym when you see it. You know somebody who lacks stability and control, and like without getting into the nuances of biomechanics, like you just want these kids to, like it, enjoy doing it, see success, and see improvement over time, just so they can establish doing it at a high level. Do I know that a split squat's going to make them a better basketball player? There's a lot of things that go into being a basketball player, but improving the performance of that might change, their ability to get in and out of a cut, to decelerate, to accelerate, so it's like, I don't know. I feel like you just really have to tether these together, because ultimately, like we're kind of telling them that they're not good at these yet, but in a roundabout way of like introducing opportunity, because I think they have a very high ceiling, most of them.
Yeah, and you talked about right before we got on here, like as you got older, especially with Gen Pop clients that are a little bit, more self-aware. Maybe, I mean, as an adult, you should be a little bit more self-aware than you are as a adolescent, I would hope, but you know, maybe not so much. But I think you're able to kind of say what you've gotten to the point you said where you kind of just put it to them and say, hey, this is what you need to do if you want to hit this goal. I think the cool thing about providing intent both with Gen Pop clients and especially with our youth athletes, it's like once you form that relationship and you show them that intent from the get-go and like form a relationship with them, a real relationship, then you are able to almost joke with them. And I think the best coaches can do this of like, hey, it turns out you're not a very good squatter. And like in a loving way say like, that's okay, we're going to get better at it, and look how much better we've gotten at it by really setting up good programs, right? But you're able to kind of use that to kind of poke them and be like, that's why we're doing this. Like, because they see the results after you've done it, but it's like, hey, remember that's why I'm the coach and that's why we're going to do it this way.
There's a subtlety inside of this that I think I want to address, and I think you'll have some opinions on this as well. But I tell my athletes like this program, because we give them all workout cards, right? They got to shoot, and it's got all the stuff on there that they need to do. I'm like, your job is not to just go through and do all the things on here. Your job is to execute this, and there will be some days where they come in, they're tired, they had some kind of period of congested competition, a weekend long tournament, and they just look and move like trash. Their knees hurt, their back hurt, whatever. It's like, I don't want you to go through this stuff and just check the box. We're here to perform. And it's like, I've had some kids, they're doing like something simple like a lateral bound. And it's like they're falling, and I'm like, oh, like I just kind of shield my eyes and turn away. And they make eye contact so they know I'm kidding with them. But it becomes this kind of joking reminder of, hey, let's slow this down, let's clean this up, let's get out of this exercise what we're intending to get out. And if we got to do an extra set or some extra reps, like, let's do it the right way. And it's okay if we don't get to exactly everything on there, because guess what? Training is dynamic. It is an emergent process. The program that I've written is now 3 weeks old, and I'm making a guess about where you're going to be and how much volume you're going to be able to tolerate 3 weeks down the road. And so I just can't emphasize, I think, that aspect of how you communicate with the athletes and let them know that you're here to make sure that they're doing it the way that's going to get them to their goals.
Yeah, I think that was awesome. Like the way you said that, and it really connected multiple things that I'm thinking of. It's like, why do I, you led this off with saying how regimented and how like I think at 30 years old, like I am, like I line out my weeks, and like I know what time I'm going to wake up. I know what I'm going to eat every day. I know, obviously, I mentioned to you we're having a baby girl in June, so I know that's going to change some things. But, my attitude towards life is like, all right, we adapt, and I just make it even more regimented, right? And I think that's what gives me some of the imposter syndrome with my career that I've chosen and what I love to do. Because training, yes, is set up like that to prevent injuries from happening or whatever, but on the actual day-to-day, it's not that at all, right? It's this adaptive, it's the opposite of being regimented. You have a program and you have it set, but just like you just said, a client texts me and says, this rib's really bothering me from some of the running I've been doing. It's like, we got to adjust right now versus what I like to do in my private life. And it's like, no. I wake up at this time. I do this. I do this. I do this. It doesn't matter. And one of the quotes I think I don't know if I created this but I got it a lot from reading the Stoics and such, is like, everything matters. How we do it matters, but everything that we can't affect doesn't matter. So like, everything matters and nothing matters. So like you said, the program, when you come in and you're sore from last night's game, and we're going to have to do 2 sets of 8 really well right now instead of 4 sets of 8, that doesn't matter. But how we do that 2 sets of 8 does matter.
It reminds me of going back to like the locus of control, right? There are other teams in the region. There are other athletes in the region that maybe have more talent, more skill, more whatever. Parents who do X, Y, and Z. Their parents are wealthy. They can get all the training, all the nutrition, yada, yada, yada. You cannot control those things. You can't control a lot of these variables, but you have to kind of return to the things that you can influence, which in most cases comes down to your responses, your actions, your choices. And it's not always easy to maintain a level of congruency with that. And I'm talking right now to my athletes. I'm talking to adult clients. I'm talking to myself. on some level too, because it's easy to get caught up in all of the other things that I think are going on out there and really forget, like in an attempt to get things to be the way that you want, you control or try to control everything that ultimately you can, while in doing so forgetting to control the thing that you can, which is you. And so like you have to sometimes strip that away, and it's okay. There's just a lot of noise sometimes. There's a lot of, these kids are glued to Instagram. I surf it, especially now that I started posting. I'm on Instagram more than I want to be. It's super annoying. I don't love social media, but I start to you fall into the compare and despair trap. I start worrying about what other people are doing. How am I going to keep up? And I'm like, oh wait, I'm on here because I'm supposed to be posting and I'm supposed to be sending a message because I'm on a mission. And it's like I totally forgot to do that thing. And so I just urge and invite everybody, especially my athletes. Hopefully you guys listen. There's so many things that are just abundantly in your control, and it's not always easy, especially when now lately I've been talking to kids, like when they want to go to college. I'm like, okay, here's the conduct of the kids that I've seen that have gone like Division I and beyond. It's not that they're like super intense and like hat down over the eyes, serious as a heart attack about what they're doing. They train hard, but it's almost like the people underestimate the consistency with which they do this. So it's this overestimation of intensity, underestimation of duration, and it becomes hard because it's a series of choices that you have control over. I know it's fun to go be a teenager and a party with your friends and be late and sometimes drink alcohol, because I know some of y'all do it. But I've heard some of these kids who are going to the next level say, look, I get it. The kids, like, the girlfriends are out, they're having fun, but I want to get up and train on Saturday. So I told them, like, I'm going home so I can get to bed by 11. And I don't know. It's just so simple, but it's something that I think can easily, especially with just the influx of these other influences, that we can really forget to leverage, because it's the only thing we have leverage over.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I could tell my youth athletes nothing else, it's just what you said. It's not the intensity of how hard you can show up one day and do something, but it's like, how long can you do what's on your sheet that you give them? If we're talking about checking boxes, and again, it means how well did I do that by checking that box on the individual day. But like, if I went through those sheets, like how many of those boxes are checked just over and over again, like just turning over those sheets day after day. And that's the difference.
Yeah, I remember the like Jerry Seinfeld. A number of people have used this example. I don't even know if it's true, but it was talking about Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, who I for sure, like, barely any of my athletes will know, because I'm getting older, and the pop culture.
Yeah, that's kind of even getting close to me. Yeah,
Well,
kind of too.
well. Anyway, the story goes. Come here, Mike. Let me pull a seat up for you on my lap. The story goes that he wrote a joke every day, and it was like, he made a chain on his calendar of X's, and the goal was like, don't break the chain, and if you do, like, get right back on it. And it's like, okay, writing a joke is easy, but writing one every day, it's like easy to do, but easy not to do. And I think that's the trap a lot of people get in, is like, well, foam rolling, 5 minutes, one muscle group, easy to do, easy not to do. And there's danger in that, because quickly, you don't realize how a lot of these small steps really accumulate to some massive difference over the course of time. In-season training, easy to do. We'll scale back. We'll make sure that the intensity is appropriate, but it's easy not to do. And guess what? If you're a single sport athlete, you play one sport a year, you're missing 1 out of 4 years of training during high school alone. You play 2 sports, you're missing about 50% of the time you have available to train. Do you think that's going to make a massive difference? We're talking about maybe 2 workouts a week in season. Not much. Easy to do, easy not to do, but over time, you can see the accumulation is going to really create separation between those who will and those who will not.
Yeah. And for the kids who are going to go to the next level, And let's take that to even the next time you come in as a freshman, and again, easy choices back then, easy to do, easy not to do. You get to the level as a freshman, and you're not at the level of the same freshman that came in with you and did that, right? So you made it now, and you're not at the same level. That is going to lead to changes down the line, right? You're behind them now, and they're there. You're trying to catch up with someone who came in at the same time as you, not even the player that's older. So I think just thinking of things, and it was tough. And I'm preaching to kids, as I did not do that as a teenager at all. I'm trying to help you see what I definitely did not see. I was like, well, I work hard when I show up. I'm the hardest worker when I show up, but I didn't see that consistency that I definitely live by now.
Yeah, there's plenty of adults who have enough trouble self-regulating this, and then you add in a kid who's got a ton of competing commitments. They're at school all day.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's useful in a lot of situations is debatable, depending on the school, depending on the coursework they're taking. Then they've got club sport, perhaps lessons, hitting lessons, pitching lessons, shooting lessons, you name it. Then they have training. Then they have being a normal, 13 to 18-year-old and managing a social life, and then their nutrition and sleep. Like it's tough. I mean, adults have a tremendous amount of trouble with it. And there was probably abundant opportunity for me to do better. And I think there's plenty of opportunity for a lot of my athletes, even at the highest level, to do better. But most people just need to trend in one direction more than they are. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? Don't let perfect be the enemy of good or done. Do what you can and continue to improve this over time. And if I can communicate, like, I think there's a lot being thrown out. I want to put like a neat bow on it to the athletes and really to anybody is you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And so there's got to be some level of sacrifice for something.
Yeah, I forget what the quote is. Something about, I can't even say it now, but there are essentially only trade-offs, right? And when I get back to the bank account stuff, and James uses that, like, you're either putting money in the bank account or you're taking money out. There's no way to put it any other way. That's in training, that's in life, and I've talked with you about, like, I just don't know what direction I want to go, because like you said, of me trying to do a lot of different things, that is almost my downfall as well. I never tend to go all in on one thing because I want to do all these things. And you just have to be self-aware that's going to pull you back from your maximal capacity to do one thing, right? And whether it be an athlete or someone gen pop in life, you know, if you want to get something better, you have to allocate resources to that thing. And you can't take those resources from a made up land. They have to be deducted from another source. So I think in my life, and I would kind of throw this to people who are listening, that's really what I'm trying to figure out, is like, I have this certain amount of finite resources, and where do I really want to allocate them?
Yeah, I think as long as most people are doing it by design rather than circumstance, or just being a willow tree that just goes with the ebbs and flows of circumstance and the conditions around them, they'll be better off. Make a conscious choice. Maybe the way you build your progress plan to get there is imperfect, but you can refine that along the way, right? It's like this continual feedback loop, no different than we would in the gym. We test, we train, we audit, we adjust, and then we go through the cycle. And that's how we determine what is the lowest hanging fruit, or as I like to say, the highest leverage point for the next training cycle or the next performance boost that you're looking for, because those will evolve and change over time as you become fitter, stronger, more able, more powerful, more explosive, faster. We have to work on different aptitudes to keep everything rising at a consistent pace.
Right. So to put a bow, I guess, in my mind on this, to make an example of it, as you're talking there, I thought about this, and it's like, again, we have a certain amount of resources, and if you're a youth athlete or a gym pop athlete, and you have a certain amount of resources as well, right? You have, you're going to have to go to school. You have to keep your social relationships. You may have other things, job that you have to do. So those are resources that you have. And then you have your training resources. These are all into one bucket eventually, right? So let's talk about an athlete that maybe wants to get faster over the next 3 months. So 2 sessions a week, right? We're talking about 24 sessions, right? If they're going to come to you and train, that you're trying to get them faster, you have the answer. You're going to get them faster if they show up and they do the work. So that is a resource that's already taken. Then if that is their goal, then that resource is allocated into that bucket, and it's going to have to be taken away from somewhere else. So they need to sit down, and then they need to literally say, this resource is going to me getting faster. Okay. And I'm going to take care of all my other things that have to be taken care of, and other things are going to fall off for the next 3 months. And that's okay. But if that is your true goal, then those things are going to fall off, and you got to be okay with that.
It's not an easy balance. Again, I think it's challenging for a teenage. I mean, before
Sure.
we started recording, I was bickering at my son who had totaled his car 3 months ago, and now his mother's letting him drive her new car, which I am not totally on board with, but I am on board with because we're a team decision. But it's forgot where I was even going with that. I think I just wanted to complain out loud to the world. I'm going to let you know, everybody who's listening to the podcast. Listen. But the point is, I don't even know what the point is. I think I just wanted to complain, to be honest. So,
yeah.
Anyway, I do want to start to wrap this up, man. We've been going hard for about an hour and covering a lot of ground. So let's talk about, your current training. What are you doing? What are you prepping for?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you've been coaching me for, I don't know how long, but it's been like 3 years, maybe.
Something like that.
Yeah. So, and I will say, I don't know. You told me I don't know how many workouts I missed, but I can tell you that it hasn't been very many in those 3 years.
Maybe when you were in Mexico.
Yeah, maybe it was adapted a little bit, but last year, I kind of followed a lot of your strength programming, and I adapted some things to run a lot more, to train for a marathon out west. Got that done. Was happy with how that went with me strength training 3 times a week. And this year I was like, I want to do a half Ironman. One of my best friends from college is an absolute stud in the half Ironman distance. He's been training for like 3 years. I don't know if that's necessary. Again, trying to allocate resources. I don't know if I'm ready to allocate my resources that much to training to become that, or if I even have the potential. But I'm like, I can run at a really good clip for a long time at a high intensity. Like, I feel like I have a natural ability to do that, and I want to continue getting stronger. So I'm going to stick with your strength programming and try to get as strong as I possibly can. That's a goal. And then also be as fast as I possibly can in a half Ironman distance. So June 9th is my first half Ironman. And from now until then, I'm going to continue lifting 3 times a week, and schedule's getting tight, but really bumping up endurance training. I think I had like 8 hours of endurance work this week. So I'm following a program on the Trainer Road app. So they kind of they have no idea what I'm doing on the strength and conditioning world, but I guess my training mind is trying to balance that while 2 people are telling me what to do. So
that's awesome.
It's unique, I think, maybe. And I've set some goals, so I'd like to go sub 5 hours in the half Ironman distance. We'll see how that goes. And 500-pound trap bar deadlift, 400-pound safety bar squat, and 300-pound bench, which would all be 2 of those 3 would be PRs. So we'll see.
And remind us of your body weight.
I run them in between like 173 and 178 day-to-day basis.
Those are some serious numbers.
Yeah, so those are high goals, so we'll see.
It's good. Over time, you're going to get there. So again, that's like appreciate like the magnitude of what you're able to do in multiple domains simultaneously is so cool. But it also takes a substantial amount of work. You're talking about your endurance training alone is 8 hours.
Yeah, and I mean, but again, I think it's only doable if I show up consistently. Like if I'm sporadic, you can't do the things. It's going to wind up in injury. And I'll say props to you. I mean, knock on wood, but haven't had a single injury in trying to combine these two things, because I think it's been so focused with communication with us, but also just like, hey, this is a long process. Like I'm not trying to do an Ironman tomorrow and hit these numbers. I got to show up for the next, 6 months and do this.
It's awesome, man. All right. So what's next for Mike Lawless?
Yeah. So just trying to deal with my imposter syndrome and trying to figure out if I can the whole training athlete thing for some of a full-time job and see where I kind of do mostly online stuff right now with gym pop and athlete clients, and then work my day job as a physical therapist during the day. So just trying to figure out over the next, I guess, 5 years, if I want to kind of make the training thing a full-time thing with physical therapy on the side. But yeah, trying to figure out that career-wise, but we'll see where it goes after half Ironman. I think right now I want to pursue that quite a bit, but it's a costly sport, so we'll see.
Need some sponsors.
Yes. Sponsor me if you're listening.
All right, so where can we find you online?
Yeah, so I'm at Lawless, LAWLESS .PT on Instagram. And that's pretty much where I post most of my stuff. So that's probably, I have a Twitter out there somewhere. I don't even know. It's lost somewhere in the land of social media. So at Lawless PT on Instagram is probably the best way to see my content.
Awesome. My guy, you've been awesome. This was a hella fun conversation. We're so thankful we got to do this, man. It's been great for me to train you. Obviously, I have a ton of respect for you as a coach as well. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this, man. It was an honor. And I'll be talking to you, through text and in training.
Absolutely. Thanks,
yeah,
brother.
Take care. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to rate and review us with 5 stars only. Then subscribe so you can get all the latest updates.